which according to Commandant Schultz, is at the brink of catastrophic failure and could affect communications between cutters and shoreside units. The Coast Guard currently operates with a $300 million annual IT shortfall. In March 2021, the service released its first data strategy, and in May 2021, its first cloud strategy. I look forward to hearing updates on these strategic and any progress on the tech revolution. I'm eager to hear how the Coast Guard prioritizes investments in its shoreside facilities, IT networks, and data systems across the service. Congress just passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which again includes $429 million for Coast Guard infrastructure. I commend Chair DeFazio's work on this historic bipartisan legislation, which provides vital investments in the country's infrastructure. Aging, failing, and condemned infrastructure presents an operational and mission-critical challenge. But this is also a great opportunity to invest in the Coast Guard to ensure it is resilient against more frequent and severe climate change hazards in the future. I look forward to a productive conversation on shoring up the Coast Guard's aging infrastructure. With that, I would like to recognize Ranking Member Gibbs.
Thank you, Chair Carvajal, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today, and it's great to see the Vice Admiral here in person. In the 19 years since it signed the Integrated Deepwater System contract, the Coast Guard has made great strides in recapitalizing its ocean-going cutters and aircraft. However, there's a long way left to go, particularly with the acquisition of the Offshore Patrol Cutter, the OPC. Unfortunately, the Coast Guard is not only facing the acquisition bill for the OPC and new polar and Great Lakes icebreakers, but also a mounting maintenance and recapitalization bill to repair and replace aging shoreside infrastructure and the cost of nearly completely replacing the Coast Guard's falling IT infrastructure. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses today what processes the Coast Guard should implement to quantify its shoreside needs so that members of the Coast Guard and their families have safe places to work and live. The service is able to carry out its increasingly complex missions, and shoreside facilities have an acceptable level of resilience to survive natural disasters. I'm particularly interested in learning the annual level of investment that would be necessary to prevent the maintenance and recapitalization backlog from growing every year, and whether the service has the data necessary to make such a calculation. I would also like to dig into the relationship between the unfunded priority list, the UPL, and the overall unfunded backlog. For instance, have items on the UPL undergone more rigorous review to determine their importance to mission capability and their readiness to move forward? The Coast Guard's tech revolution, as it is characterized by the Commandant, is in its infancy. I look forward to learning how the service intends to piggyback off existing programs for which they have already paid development cost. The composite hull vessel, which the Coast Guard did not build, the electronic health records, logistics information management, and the state-of-the-art ship-to-air to shore communication systems, none of which the Coast Guard has ever implemented. Proof that the Coast Guard does not have the resources or the internal expertise to develop such systems on its own. Finally, I look forward to learning how the service plans to stay current once it implements its IT tech revolution. IT systems change so rapidly, and the service must, at the same time, both plan for the future and catch up with the present. Thank you, Chair Carvajal, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Gibbs. I would like now to welcome the witnesses, Vice Admiral Paul Thomas, Deputy Commandant of Mission Support for the United States Coast Guard, and Ms. Heather McLeod, Acting Director of Homeland Security and Justice for the United States Government Accountability Office. Thank you both for being here today, and I look forward to your testimony. Without objection, our witnesses' full statements will be included in the record. Since your written testimony has been made a part of the record, the subcommittee requests that you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. With that, Vice Admiral Thomas, you may proceed.
Chairman Carvajal, Ranking Member Gibbs, member of the subcommittee, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today about the Coast Guard's efforts to sustain and recapitalize our shore and IT infrastructure that you know is critical to our service readiness and enables our mission execution. I have to start by thanking this Congress and this committee in particular for your resolute support of the women and men of the United States Coast Guard. As you mentioned, our service is in the midst of the most significant surface and air asset recapitalization since World War II. The ships and aircraft we are building today will guard our nation's shores for generations to come. But as our Commandant says, every Coast Guard mission begins and ends at a shore facility, and we must do better at building the infrastructure necessary to support this fleet of the future. You have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to modernizing Coast Guard infrastructure, as evidenced by this hearing today and by recent investments in our Coast Guard. While Coast Guard personnel take intense pride in their efforts to support our operations, we continue to face challenges related to maintenance and recapitalization of our infrastructure. Geographically dispersed across the nation and around the globe, Coast Guard units range from large operational and industrial facilities in urban areas to small tactical units in remote locations. Each of these facilities poses a unique maintenance challenge, and many are aging at a rate that stresses our ability to maintain or recapitalize them. From 2017 to 2020, the Government Accountability Office undertook studies that examined how the Coast Guard manages its $21 billion real property inventory. The recommendations provided by the GAO shined a light on areas where we need to improve, and it led to our ongoing modernization of our civil engineering program and processes. While our infrastructure challenges cannot be solved overnight, I can assure you that we are taking steps right now, largely based on the GAO recommendations, which will ensure the Coast Guard maintains the readiness that the nation needs and deserves for its maritime first responders. With your help, we're investing in modern, resilient facilities that reduce risks to our people, our assets, and our missions. We're working to execute the nearly $1.2 billion in supplemental appropriations that Congress provided in the wake of the 2017 and 18 hurricane seasons, and the nearly $2 billion major shore infrastructure appropriations that have been made since 2018. Because critical infrastructure to support our modern fleet extends beyond traditional brick and mortar facilities, in 2020, the service embarked upon a technology revolution. Designed to bring the Coast Guard into the 21st century, this effort is empowering our people with reliable, mobile, and integrated technology. Bolstered by funding in the CARES Act, we were able to maintain mission readiness during the global pandemic through investments in hardware, software, and network upgrades. From mobility applications to underway cutter connectivity, the strategic investments we are making now and must continue to make in the future across our IT systems ensure that we remain ready, resilient, and responsive. The Coast Guard is also making investments in our most important resource, our people. Thanks to Congress, we can now access the Coast Guard Housing Fund and reinvest proceeds from divested properties into family housing needs. Over the past several years, we've emphasized improvement in construction projects for Coast Guard-owned housing, and we've resourced those projects through the Housing Fund. From Jonesport, Maine to Kodiak, Alaska, we are constructing family housing units that are modern and adequately sized and serve our members and their families very well. The Coast Guard remains semper paratus, always ready to answer our nation's call. And reliable, resilient, modern infrastructure remains a cornerstone to service readiness. I thank you again for this opportunity to testify today and for your steadfast support of our Coast Guard. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Thomas. We will now proceed. Ms. McLeod, you may proceed.
Chair Carvajal, Ranking Member Gibbs, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss our recent and ongoing work on the condition and management of the Coast Guard's infrastructure. My testimony includes information from our work on these issues and the Coast Guard's progress in implementing recommendations we have made in these areas. Coast Guard infrastructure assets are vast and include more than 20,000 facilities at over 2,700 locations. It's often been stated that Coast Guard missions begin and end at a Coast Guard facility. Good management of these facilities is critical to the success of Coast Guard operations. However, our work has raised concerns, including challenges the Coast Guard faces in addressing its aging and vulnerable infrastructure. For example, our work identified that almost half of the Coast Guard's shore infrastructure is beyond its service life, resulting in costly recapitalization, construction, and maintenance project backlogs. And as of 2019, these backlogs totaled more than $2.6 billion. In fact, in 2018, the Coast Guard estimated that it would take almost 400 years to address the $1.77 billion backlog of major projects it reported for that year. Also, it's likely that the estimated costs to address the backlog are understated. This is particularly concerning, not only because of the amount of time needed to address the backlog, but because of other potential impacts. For example, we have identified that deferring maintenance can lead to higher costs in the long run, while also posing risks to safety, security, readiness, staffing resources, and mission execution. GAO has made recommendations to improve the Coast Guard's shore infrastructure management efforts, including reporting its needs more completely and accurately. Coast Guard concurred with all of these recommendations, and in some cases has taken steps toward addressing them. Some of these steps include prioritizing critical infrastructure and incorporating resilience planning. For example, the Coast Guard has a process to classify all of its real property under a tier system and establish minimum investment targets by tier. Recent Coast Guard guidance prioritizes expenditures on shore infrastructure, such as piers or runways, over administrative buildings. And as Vice Admiral Thomas noted, the Coast Guard incorporated resilience into shore infrastructure planning, better positioning itself to prepare for, recover from, and successfully adapt to adverse events. These are promising steps, and the Coast Guard could further improve management of its infrastructure with additional action in the following 4 areas, including employing models for predicting the outcome of investments and analyzing trade-offs to achieve cost savings. Using such models would help the Coast Guard prioritize investments across its shore infrastructure portfolio. More efficiently managing resources by disposing of unneeded assets. Given the Coast Guard's competing acquisition, operational, and maintenance needs and project backlog, this could help to mitigate some of its resource challenges. Reporting shore infrastructure information more completely and accurately in congressionally required plans and budget requests. This additional detail could help the Congress prioritize funding to address the Coast Guard's shore infrastructure backlog. Lastly, ensuring investments in data infrastructure address its mission and user needs. For example, we found past Coast Guard efforts to upgrade a key data system, Missile, did not deliver some planned functionalities. Relatedly, we now have preliminary work reviewing a range of Coast Guard IT infrastructure and cybersecurity issues. This work indicates there may be gaps in how the Coast Guard has applied policies and leading practices to management of its IT infrastructure and the associated workforce. In closing, Coast Guard has taken some positive steps, but could do more to improve the management of its vast and aging infrastructure. This includes ensuring they have sound processes to prioritize projects and analyze trade-offs among projects. GAO will continue to follow up with the Coast Guard on these issues. This completes my prepared statement, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLeod. We will now move on to member questions. Each member will be recognized for 5 minutes, and I will start by recognizing myself. Vice Admiral Thomas, I recently had a chance to visit Air Station Borinquen in Puerto Rico, where many facilities were unusable due to hurricane damage. As a result, medical and child care facilities were moved to station housing units. Captain Peña and the rest of her crew are doing their best to work with what they have, and I'm under the impression that renovations are being planned for housing, the hangar, and other facilities at this location. I know that the Coast Guard operates with limited resources, but investments made on infrastructure should be done responsibly and in a resilient fashion. Admiral Thomas, given the facility's maintenance backlog and the poor condition of the Coast Guard's infrastructure, has the service assessed the risks to its infrastructure posed by natural hazards, including those driven by climate change? What effects does the decrepit infrastructure have on mission capability?
Well, Chairman, thank you for the question, and thank you for visiting our team out there at Barranquin. Kevin Pena is a incredible leader. I'm sure you got that impression, and I know the crew enjoyed seeing you there. Barranquin's an example of one of those places that was impacted by the 2018 hurricane season and funded by the supplemental money, so we are executing that money and rebuilding that facility. But you asked me about our process to assess our facilities' vulnerabilities to climate change. We are in phase 2 of that assessment now. The first phase involved really looking at all of our key facilities and determining which are vulnerable to which types of climate change-related incidents, whether it be flooding or fire or sea level rise. Phase 2 is to go back and look real specifically at how resilient those structures are to those types of incidents, and then phase 3 would be to actually do the engineering to improve the resiliency. So we're working our way through that. That will take some time. As you know, when we do recapitalize our infrastructure, we do it to the latest standards for both sea level rise and flooding, et cetera. So when we have a chance to build new, we're building resilient. Thank you, sir.
Admiral Thomas, what about the impact that decrepit, deficient infrastructure has on mission capability and morale?
There's no question, our infrastructure is critical to our missions. And you can look at places around the Coast Guard where we have to do our mission differently and less efficiently because we have infrastructure problems. I'll just give you a couple examples earlier this week at our Coast Guard yard, where our utilities are over 100 years old and need to be recapped, both the electrical distribution and the steam systems. We lost power for a couple of days. We need to recap the distribution system there, and that will make some of our ships come out of the yard late, which will impact our ability to operate them. If you go to Kodiak, Alaska, or you go to Charleston, South Carolina, the piers there need to be recapitalized, and they require us to operate differently. In Kodiak, if the winds exceed about 40 knots, we have to move the ships. In Pensacola, where we have 2 piers that have collapsed, our ships sometimes need to get underway when they're not scheduled to be underway to free up the piers that we're borrowing from the Navy because they need it from one of their ships. So there are absolutely real impacts, but the good news is in Pensacola, in the bill, there's $28 million for us to recap there. Kodiak, $130 million for a recap there. So we're getting after it, sir, but you're absolutely right. A lot of operational impact.
Thank you. Ms. McLeod, as part of your testimony, you stated that the Coast Guard has given its infrastructure a grade of C- on average, which the Coast Guard defines as mediocre in fair to good condition, but showing signs of deterioration and increasingly vulnerable to risk. Do you agree with that assessment, and what specific actions should the Coast Guard implement to incorporate natural hazard and climate change resilience into its infrastructure, recapitalization, repair, and maintenance projects?
Thank you for that question. Yes, the Coast Guard has made its own grade in this area and applying the industry standards. It's hard to know what the Coast Guard's greatest needs and priorities are without more information on how it's assessing individual projects. As noted, the Coast Guard is making progress in the area of resilience in terms of new construction and major renovations. And we think those are steps in the right direction, and we'll continue to monitor them.
Thank you. I'm running out of time, so I will now proceed with Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs, and thank you, Admiral, for the testimony. I've been a big supporter of the Coast Guard for years, and I'm proud to say that I've watched the Coast Guard with 2 bases when I first started 48 years ago. Now I got probably more bases than any place in the United States, and because we got more water, that helps out. But I want to thank you for your comments on Kodiak, and that leads up to my question. There was $429 million for projects in the infrastructure bill, where I learned when I was a trader and a few other things. But how do you plan on spending that money? Or you mentioned Kodiak. Is there any other areas in Alaska that you would be interested in expanding the role of the Coast Guard?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. You know, we are excited about expanding our operations in Alaska. Our people love to serve up in that state, and they love to serve the people of that state. And we're excited about sending 6 of our FRCs up there. We're working on home ports for those in Ketchikan and Kodiak and Sitka and Seward. The bill that you mentioned has some money specifically marked for additional housing in Kodiak, which is going to be vital as we move OPCs up there. So we're building out that home port. And then, you know, future investment in Alaska is getting Kodiak ready for the OPCs and the FRCs. We have just recently cut the contract that will make Ketchikan a temporary home port for the FRC that will eventually end up in Sitka. We expect that home port to be built out by FY24. That hull gets delivered this fiscal year. So we're moving into Alaska, and we really appreciate your support.
I appreciate the answer too. There's a little what you call regional conflict because we're looking at icebreakers and other Coast Guard vessels, and some people in the lower 48 want them stationed there, which is a long ways away. It costs a lot of money. We have facilities in Alaska, and I'm proud to hear that you're talking about the housing. That's one of our biggest challenges to the Coast Guard Corps, is making sure we have the proper housing for the people that are wives and children, where the crewmen can go out and do the rescue work and identification. What about the St. Paul Island? Have you made any decisions yet, or are you going to make one on utilizing it as operational capacity?
And we absolutely like to operate out of St. Paul as one of the 3 forward operating locations that we utilize, particularly when we know where the fishing fleet's going to be, and we need to have an enhanced search and rescue posture. As you know, we had a fire at the facility there about 2 years ago, so we need to rebuild it. That work is contracted. It should be completed by this coming spring. And then we have a couple issues with the hangar there, which is not Coast Guard owned, but we're negotiating with the landlord to get some improvements there. So we hope to be back into that forward operating location early next year.
Now, one of the things that concerns me is that for the first time, we have the military, Air Force, and Navy, and actually the Navy used to be up there, but starting to consider the Arctic. Are you all working together as a Arctic decision-making group, or are you separated programs? And one, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, we have joint service talks on all of the theaters of operation. In the Arctic, we work most closely with the Army Corps of Engineers, of course, but our commanders in the 17th Coast Guard District are coordinating with their peers across the services, you know, on a daily basis.
Yeah, Admiral, the reason my interest in this for the members of the committee, a lot of activity in the Arctic now, but mainly that's where the minerals are that we need to utilize for the new society. Graphite, lithium, the whole bit is up there. And China is very actively involved in the Arctic, and they have nothing to do with it, but they're there. And Russia, of course, is way ahead of us in the icebreaking capability. We hear a lot about icebreakers. You know, I've supported, I want to have an icebreaker. Here's money to build one. But the biggest thing we need is to support facilities, you know, Port Clarence, even as far north as Barrow, Kodiak you talked about already, St. Paul. I can go down Nome, because this is the big issue in the future of America is the Arctic. And you're going to play a major role, like I say, you always have. We've given you a lot of responsibilities over the years, and sometimes haven't funded you quite a few times. And this is our role in this committee to make sure you get the proper funding. And your mission is really dedicated to what your mission is charged with: rescue, search, and protection. So I do appreciate your work with the Coast Guard. And for those in the audience, thank you. And for the Admiral, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Young. We will now move to Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pardon me, Admiral, can you address kind of the basic question the President just signed the infrastructure bill, included $429 million for the Coast Guard. What's the Coast Guard's plans to invest those dollars specifically into the subject matter we have today, the shoreside infrastructure?
Thanks for the question, and again, thanks for the tremendous support of the Coast Guard. $429 million will certainly help us get after this infrastructure backlog. I think there's about $130 million or so that are going to go to housing improvements and some improvements at our training centers. There's about 158 or so we're looking at major shore infrastructure that supports our cutters. 120 million that's directed toward improvements or construction of new child development centers. So that money is definitely being put to good use. I don't know it precisely where all those projects are yet, sir, but we can certainly, as we develop those plans, keep you well informed.
Yeah, thanks. And there's a lot in my district, you should know that.
Yes, sir.
No, probably not, but we'll figure that out as we move forward. So this week in the Northwest, we've had some pretty severe storms and extreme weather. And so, as we talked earlier, can you walk through the process that your local commanders go through to do damage assessments on shoreside infrastructure when you have storms like this, and what the timeline then is for making the investment into the repairs?
Sir, we've been watching from afar the developments out in the Pacific Northwest and the weather, and certainly send our sympathies to those who were adversely impacted by that weather. We have, unfortunately, a lot of experience in doing damage assessment after weather events on coastal facilities. The process, the local commanders will do the first assessment when they can get back into a unit if they had to leave, and then if there's significant damage or they just think they need higher level assistance, we have damage assessment teams that we flow into there, which are experts, civil engineers, et cetera. And those assessment teams will then call in repair teams to make the first level repairs in order to really stop the damage. But that's the process, sir. We have a lot of experience. I have not heard of any damage reports yet from the 13th district.
Okay, thanks. And then I want to shift to GAO, if I could, to Acting Director McLeod. In your assessment of critical infrastructure for the Coast Guard, do you calculate, or how do you calculate in climate resiliency into your cost estimates? Is this something that's additional? Is it folded in? Is it not counted at all?
I'm sorry, sir, the question's for me?
No, it's for Acting Director McLeod.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And when we reviewed the Coast Guard's practice in this area, we did find some gaps in the analysis here. And as I noted, they are making steps in this area, especially for new construction and major renovations. This is an area that we've seen some progress and will continue to monitor for the Coast Guard, but this should really be considered for all projects in the analysis of the cost estimates, and will really help in the trade-offs among projects, considering the trade-offs.
Thank you. What standards do you use in order to fold in a climate resiliency premium?
Well, that's really up to the Coast Guard what standards, I could take that question for the record in terms of other practices that GAO has done in this area, but the Coast Guard is evaluating different models for this.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll go back to Admiral McLeod then, or Admiral Thomas then, for the answer to that question.
Well, sir, when we are recapitalizing, or building a new facility or significant renovations, then we use the industry standards for resiliency that are pretty well laid out. We use environmental standards in the lead standard. What I think you're asking me is, as we look at our maintenance backlog or our recapitalization backlog, how we roll in that, and we are just in the infancy of doing that, sir. Where that's the vulnerability assessment that I spoke to, and I don't know where those numbers will go, sir, once we roll that in.
Okay, that's great to know. I appreciate that. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to Representative Gibbs, Ranking Member Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman Carvajal. The Coast Guard has had a lot of challenges and not really a lot of success in developing their IT system development over the years, especially the failed electronic health care and logistics management systems being the most spectacular. In both of the cases, the Coast Guard is seeking to use Department of Defense systems which will save development costs and shorten the implementation of time frames. After years of patching what we call the Missions Information for Safety and Law Enforcement, MISSIL, a basic tool used by the Coast Guard, and we all know it's really a database system. It stores data for pollution incidents, marine accidents, search and rescue cases, law enforcement activities, et cetera. Tracks Coast Guard's regulatory enforcement. In May of 2020 last year, the Coast Guard decided to replace this system. Admiral, does the Coast Guard plan to look for an already developed platform at other federal agencies or other armed forces to save time and development costs?
Ranking Member Gibbs, thank you for the question, and there's no doubt you are correct that we have struggled with IT acquisitions, and the reason for that is that we've not looked at them as operational platforms. That changed several years ago. We've now modernized how we acquire, how we set requirements, acquire, sustain our IT systems, because they are operational assets, just like a cutter or a ship. So, I'm happy to report that we have now gone live with our electronic medical records across the country. We're the first service to achieve that. You asked about, how we use other services. We're doing some mobile applications for our recruiters, for example. We're borrowing an Army program for that. We're doing some work for our Marine inspectors that brings missile to mobile. So we definitely look to our peers for solutions that have worked for them and see how we can incorporate them. And we will do that as we recapitalize missile.
Because I think there has been a reluctance in the past to change the operational systems, right? Or to integrate them.
I'm sorry, sir?
I think there's been some reluctance in the past not wanting to change the operational systems.
Change is always hard. I think we're past that, sir, and particularly because we modernized the process that we use to develop requirements and then find the solutions to those requirements. We're doing it a lot more like we do for buying a ship or an airplane, and that's a big improvement.
Of course, I know Ms. McLeod, in her oral testimony, kind of alluded to the challenges of this, and the GAO has recommended that the Coast Guard follow its key system development processes, identify the enhancements and analyze alternatives and all that, and the Coast Guard has agreed to those recommendations. Now that the Coast Guard has decided to replace the missile, we'll continue to follow the GAO's recommendations in selecting and acquiring the new system.
Yeah, so we are thankful to the GAO for the work that they've done for us and the continued engagement as we work to implement those recommendations. We've been able to close out 2 of them, and we're working on closing a 3rd, which would leave about 7. So we're not turning back. We really have used the GAO report to, stimulate a modernization effort, particularly in our civil engineering. So we'll continue to follow those recommendations.
It's also come to my attention, the committee's been told best way to find information regarding pre-missile information is for us to file a Freedom of Information Act request. Will that information currently in missile be available in the new version of the system?
That's absolutely the goal, sir, and really that's part of our data for decisions efforts. We're trying to build an integrated data environment where all that missile information would be, and right now our data is accessible vertically only. We need to make it accessible horizontally, and that will allow us to answer those types of data calls.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Also, Vice Admiral, in your testimony, you state, as we modernize our fleet, we must also modernize our workforce. Obviously, I think everybody here agrees with that. And in 2010, part of that was called modernization. The Coast Guard implemented structural changes both in the field, senior leadership, and it actually created your position. After more than a decade, the Coast Guard has a long way to go to complete this modernization workforce. What percentage of the Coast Guard workforce has manpower requirements and analysis been performed, and how many of the 158 unit types?
That's an ongoing effort for us as well. The manpower requirements assessments, we worked to really refine the tools that we use to get that done. In some areas, those tools are working very well in our sector staffing model, for example. In others, we're still maturing it, for example, how we man our bases. I don't have an exact percentage for you, so
Let me ask this final question, it's about out of time. When is the Coast Guard, when do you plan to complete the implementation of the 2018 manpower requirements plan?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch.
Okay, you got the plan, when you, the implementation, complete the 2018 manpower requirement plan. When did you plan to have that completed?
I'll have to take that for the record. As I said, that's an ongoing effort. It's a big effort, and we've been focusing on getting the right tools in place so the assessment itself is valuable.
Okay, thank you. You go back.
Thank you, Representative Gibbs. Next, we'll move on to Representative Weber. Representative Weber? saw Representative Weber online, so we'll move on. Representative Steele. Representative Van Drew.
I'm here.
There he is, good.
Great. Representative Van Drew.
Did a
you may
minor
proceed.
minor technical difficulty there.
You may proceed, Representative Van Drew.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Vice Admiral Thomas, and thank you for appearing before the House Subcommittee on the Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation to discuss the United States need to ensure that our Coast Guard is prepared for the 21st century. The U.S. Coast Guard is expanding operations across the country, of course, as you know, and across the world. Whether executing ice-breaking missions in the Arctic Circle or conducting search and rescue operations off the U.S. shoreline, the Coast Guard has a lot to do and plans on doing even more in the coming decades. We can build all the cutters in the world, but we need personnel training to operate those vessels. Most of those personnel come through the training center in Cape May, in my district, as you know. Training Center Cape May is the Coast Guard's sole accession point for its enlisted workforce. 80% of the Coast Guard's total workforce is absorbed through the Training Center Cape May. The facility's existing barracks were constructed in the 1960s, and they are in serious need of modernization. I was really pleased to work with Commandant Schultz to get phase 1 of the Training Center Cape May recapitalization project listed as the Coast Guard's #1 housing shore infrastructure budget priority for 2021. This year, Congress will be appropriating $65 million to enable phase 1 of this 4-phase project. The barracks recapitalization will increase the training center's capacity by 1,000 additional service members in a year. This investment ensures that the Coast Guard will have the workforce it needs to accomplish its mission at home and abroad, and to create a far greater opportunities also for women in the Coast Guard. When the training center was last upgraded, the appropriation cycle fell short, and now the facility is short an entire barracks. We cannot allow this to happen again. It is imperative that this current project not fall short. The Congress is funding phase 1 in fiscal year 2022, and I believe that we should move to fund phase 2, 3, and 4 over the next 3 fiscal years so that the entire project cycle is provided for when phase 1 is initiated in 2024. Recent meetings with the Coast Guard budget and engineering team confirmed that the year-over-year approach is feasible and strategic. This project is too important for us to take half measures. So my question would be, Vice Admiral Thomas, please speak on why the Training Center Cape May recapitalization is a top priority for the Coast Guard, and how this project will produce a more modern and capable Coast Guard workforce, and just how important it is. It'll come out better out of your mouth than it actually does mine, because you live it. So thank you.
Congressman Van Drew, thank you for the question, and thank you for all your support for our facility at Cape May. And I know you've visited there several times, and that's always appreciated as well. I mean, you're absolutely right. Cape May is the heartbeat of our service in terms of where we assess new Coast Guard men and women. And unlike the other services, or more so than most of the other services, our men and women seem to stay around in the service longer. So we need modern facilities there. One of the reasons we need modern facilities there is so that we can compete with the other services. If you walk onto the training center that the Navy keeps up in the Great Lakes, you see a state-of-the-art facility that is really attractive to young people who are looking to find a career. That might not be the case at Cape May, but with your help, we're going to rebuild those barracks in 4 phases, add some modern facilities that will allow us to do our physical training indoors, because right now, it doesn't matter what that Cape May weather is, our recruits are outdoors. So it's absolutely a service imperative for us, and we appreciate your support, sir.
Well, I appreciate you, Vice Admiral, and the job that you do. And let me just say, as far as the weather in Cape May, It's always sunny and beautiful, so no worries about that. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. Representative Weber. Representative Steele. Seeing no more members going in the first round, I will now recognize each member for an additional 5 minutes of questions. And I will start by recognizing myself. As I mentioned in my opening testimony or statement, limited access to housing forces coasties to live far away from their duty stations oftentimes. Limited childcare infrastructure forces coasties to split parenting duties with their partners and reduces quality family time. And continued facility issues degrades the workplace experience. The Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act is an important first step to improving the quality of life for coasties by providing funds to address deteriorating facilities. I also hope that the Build Back Better bill, which provides another $600 million for Coast Guard infrastructure, is enacted soon. This will bring the total investment in the Coast Guard to $1 trillion. Admiral Thomas, how will these investments help the Coast Guard recruit and retain its talented service members?
Well, Chairman, first of all, thank you, because you are rightly focused on our workforce and their families. They are the only way we get our mission done and are essential to service readiness. The access to childcare and access to housing challenge for the Coast Guard is very different than it is for the other services. Because we're not a garrisoned force, we don't operate out of large bases, so it's harder for us to centralize those types of services. We operate in small, remote locations. So our ability to support our members and their families, whether it be through childcare or housing or access to healthcare, is absolutely vital to our ability to recruit and to retain. The two are linked. And what we like to do is use our entire brand. Our missions are compelling to people to join our service, but our missions combined with world-class support to members and their families, that is very compelling, and that is why it's so critical to our ability to recruit and retain. And we thank you for your continued focus and support.
Thank you. Coast Guard's Technology Revolution Roadmap describes initiatives to improve IT infrastructure and cutter connectivity, among other things. The service states it has completed many of the actions to address those initiatives, such as improving remote access, doubling cutter bandwidth, and increasing cutter connectivity coverage areas. Admiral Thomas, from your perspective, do you believe that those initiatives received adequate funding and have accomplished what they were intended to do?
Again, thanks for the question. The Tech Rev is an important effort. Someone earlier made the point that it really can never end. You never finish because tech continues to revitalize or to need to be recapitalized. And so we know that we're not done and we need to push. We invested about $100 million in FY22, about 90 or so, or FY21, and about 90 million or so are coming. That's not adequate. We are trying to catch up, and then we have to keep up. So we need a recurring, regular, reliable, predictable, recurring IT investments that are keeping up with inflation.
Thank you. Ms. McLeod, I'm curious to hear the GAO's perspective on whether the Coast Guard receives adequate funding in its progress towards tech revolution targets. What are the biggest challenges with your current IT infrastructure, and what efforts are underway to mitigate those challenges?
So our work has shown in this area that the Coast Guard could be more transparent in its budget requests and information. This type of information and additional detail could better support budget requests and more documented, better document trade-offs and analysis. Our work on the Coast Guard IT systems and some of these initiatives that we're discussing right now is really in the early stages, but we do have a number of studies underway at the Coast Guard, as we do in other federal agencies across the government, looking at how the systems are procured and come in online, as well as the sufficiency of the workforce that supports this IT revolution. So we will continue to look at these areas. As I said, we have a number of studies underway that we'll be completing in 2022.
Thank you. Admiral Thomas, if Congress were to provide increased funding for Coast Guard IT infrastructure, what would it allow the service to do for its service members operationally?
Well, regular, reliable funding allows us to plan for both improvements and recapitalization of critical systems that will put in the hands of our people technology that is mobile, that is reliable, and that is integrated, and that will unlock their potential to complete our missions in ways that we probably can't even think of today.
Thank you very much. Now I will go to Ranking Member Gibbs.
Thank you. Ms. McLeod, the GAO estimated in 2019 that 45% of the Coast Guard's shoreside infrastructure was beyond its anticipated service life of 65 years. And I can go on and give you more statistics. We all know that, the challenges. But I guess my first question, I'll go to Vice Admiral Thomas and then Acting Director Ms. McLeod. How does the Coast Guard compare and prioritize cutter and aviation assets, shoreside maintenance and recapitalization needs, IT recapitalization, when determining how to carry out your mission to the greatest extent practical?
Ranking Member Gibbs, thanks for the question. Obviously, that is a multidimensional math problem. We are talking about trading off. I mean, we are a seagoing service. We operate on and above the sea. We prioritize recapitalization of our ships and our airplanes so that we can conduct our missions. When it comes to how do we prioritize our shore infrastructure, you consider the complexity of that inventory. It ranges from buildings and runways and piers to towers and antennas. And then you combine that with our need to maintain and recap existing infrastructure as we build new infrastructure for the new ships. What we've done with regard to our PC&I funding is we've really focused the investments in the new facilities around kind of what we call centers of gravity in places like Charleston and Pensacola and LA and Seattle. When it comes to our O&S money, we have a process that we have the operators meet the engineers. They understand the risk both in terms of engineering and operations, and we prioritize that way, sir.
Ms. Cloud, do you believe the Coast Guard has sufficiently strong analysis in place to make these comparisons?
In our 2019 report, as you mentioned, we did find a lack of transparency on how the Coast Guard is prioritizing among projects. These include the various asset lines that you just mentioned. So we did recommend that the Coast Guard provide more information on the numbers behind the analysis and how they're prioritizing projects.
Okay, so I guess I'll go back to you, Vice Admiral. The GAO is requesting more information so they can make a better analysis. Do you agree that you're working towards that goal?
Well, so we've done a number of things since 2019 to implement those recommendations, including implementing the modeling tools that were mentioned. We expect that to be fully implemented by 24, but that will allow us to understand much better what a dollar spent today will avoid in 10 years, for example. So we are definitely working toward implementation of those. We've improved our prioritization guidance to the decision makers. We've centralized some prioritization that used to be decentralized. It's now centralized at headquarters. So we're marching down that road, sir.
Okay, good. I do have a question on process, I guess. When projects are reported from the field and reviewed at the district, area, and headquarters to determine the projects are included in the administration's annual budget request, which projects are put on the unfunded priority list and which languish from year to year? So how do you this process rate age, importance to mission, resilience, and health and safety against one another? So we got the, figure out the, what's priority, how's it work up through the system from the field to headquarters?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say thank you for that tool that we call the unfunded priority list, because it is very helpful for us to communicate with Congress what we need, but we can't get to in our base budget. And you heard the GAO talk about how we tier our assets, and those that are most impactful to operations get priority typically. The unfunded priority list is a place for us to put other important projects that might not be as impactful to operations or are so large that, like, for example, $130 million for a pier in Kodiak, so large that it would squeeze a lot of other projects out of a $280 million budget request. So that's how we prioritize, and that's how we use the UPL.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Gibbs. Before we move on to our next member, I just want to correct the record. In my questioning, I said that the total Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and Build Back Better was $1 trillion. I know your eyes opened up.
I was holding you to that.
It's $1 billion, not $1 trillion.
I wrote it down.
Just for the record.
I just like to spend so much money.
With that, I'll move on to Representative Weber. Representative Weber? Representative Larson? I guess I had it wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral, last month I asked Vice Admiral Bushman for an update on expansion at USCG base Seattle. He stated that the Seattle will be a hub for the Coast Guard, but the right assets need to be in place for that facility to successfully carry out its mission. From a strictly infrastructure point of view, where in the process is the Coast Guard with expansion at USCG base Seattle?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. We're excited about making Seattle a hub. We have definitely planned to put the 3 polar security cutters up there. We'd like to put more cutters. We'll have to expand the footprint there. We're working to do that. We currently are in the first phase of preparing that facility for the PSCs. We're about to start the dredging process. We have additional monies earmarked to rehab the piers. But right now, our focus on finding some swing space for those cutters that are currently home-ported there so that we can come in and dredge the basin. But we definitely plan to make Seattle a hub.
Yeah, can you clarify, you said the 3 PSCs, and then you said additional cutters. Do you mean additional?
Well, we did an
OPCs?
environmental study, sir, where we said, we're gonna have 3 PSCs home-ported there and up to 2 other major cutters. We haven't made any decisions. Part of that is to see how viable it is. We need to, as I said, expand our footprint there if we were to do that.
So it could be additional PSCs, it could be OPC, it could be just some cutters generally.
It's a deep water port. We're on the West Coast, so we're gonna need to maximize what we put there.
All right. So are you ahead, is expansion at Seattle ahead or behind other hubs or other facilities with similar uses?
I think Seattle's on track, sir. There are some places where we're probably not gonna make our time targets, but we'll still get those ships in there.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back. Thank you. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, Representative Larson. Next, we'll move to Representative Weber. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, including me in your subcommittee, and I'm very grateful because we had the oil spill in my district. So I want to ask Vice Admiral Thomas, according to the testimony today, the Coast Guard continues to face challenges in ensuring that its infrastructure investment meet mission and user needs. Those challenges have been felt hard by those who live in my congressional district. On Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, there were reports of an oil leak off the coast, and the Coast Guard waited 15 hours before confirming the oil spill. The Coast Guard claimed darkness and lack of proper technology caused them to delay their surveillance, leading to the 15 hours of lost time between the first official reports and a full confirmation to the public. This is completely unacceptable. What essential technology is needed to ensure there is never a future delay in surveillance?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman Steele. I'm not personally involved in that response, though having kind of an insider's view from afar and having worked those types of responses before, outside of the 15-hour delay that you mentioned, you know, that response seemed to have gone as well as possible. The team gelled quickly and incorporated volunteers. They used the right equipment, and it's never good to be picking up oil off the beach, but they seem to have done that efficiently and effectively. With regard to technology, you know, we are constantly, in fact, just yesterday, I met with the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Director. We're constantly looking at technology that will help us sense and understand the environment that we operate in and for which we are responsible better. Are there some technologies that may have allowed us to confirm that oil spill quicker? Yes, they absolutely are. The remote vehicles with the right sensors, and we're moving to employ those, you know, where it makes sense. But I appreciate your concern. We'll absolutely learn lessons from this particular response and incorporate new technology where it makes sense so we can do the job more effectively.
Thank you. According to Lieutenant K. Neen, investigations have shown off the coast of Orange County during a storm in January 2021, a cargo ship's anchor was dragged an unknown distance before striking the 16-inch steel pipe. That same pipe leaked oil on October 2nd. Ships entering the port can be sent to one of 60 locations as they wait for an opening. These areas are identified by the Coast Guard, and Marine Exchange approves these ships to safely drop their anchors. We're talking about 30 tons weight. If existing pipelines are mapped improperly or moved, how can the Coast Guard safely monitor where these anchors are dropping? Because we have not just oil pipelines, but sewer pipelines and cable lines there. Are proper investment being made to meet this mission capability?
Well, the Coast Guard monitors the anchorages. We're not really responsible to keep track of the pipelines, although we work with our sister agencies to make sure we have the most recent locations. You know, the issue of port congestion out in the West Coast, for example, is a maritime transportation system governance issue, like many that we've dealt with before. And my experience says that the best solutions to those types of issues are at their foundation, industry-led and market-driven, with regulation layered in where it makes sense in order to provide a level playing field and kind of moderate the behavior of outliers. That's what I see happening right now in Southern California as they are taking action to hold ships well offshore so that the anchorages don't fill up, and that's really the best solution to this type of a congestion problem.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Steele. We will now move on to Representative Gallagher.
Thank you. Vice Admiral Thomas, thank you for being here. Recently, you know, the news has been filled with stories about supply chain problems, supply chain vulnerabilities, supply chain disruptions. But an industrial commodity supply chain concern has received much less attention. And I'm talking about supplying iron ore to U.S. Great Lakes steel manufacturers. As you know, that steel is needed to build Navy ships, Army vehicles, U.S. manufactured cars, trucks, farm equipment, appliances, and other equipment. Unfortunately, due to a gap between the departure of the Coast Guard cutter Alder from Duluth and its replacement's arrival, my understanding is that Lake Superior is going to be without a Coast Guard icebreaking capacity that would ensure the safe movement of iron ore cargo vessels this winter. Also, the Coast Guard's current Great Lakes icebreaking performance standards do not measure any ice impacts on commercial navigation in Lake Superior. So I guess that leads to two questions. One, what will the Coast Guard do this winter to ensure vital cargoes like iron ore can move through the Great Lakes? And two, how will the Coast Guard better track their performance of this mission?
Well, thank you for the question. It is not lost on the Coast Guard the economic impact of the Great Lakes waterway system, and so I appreciate your continued focus on ensuring that commerce can flow up there. I'm not aware of the icebreaker laydown for this winter. That's something our district commander would certainly manage. I do know that the 9th District Commander has agreements with the Canadians, for example, where, you know, they figure out together where the priorities are for icebreak, and the Canadians will assist us and we will assist them. But I'll have to take it for the record to give you some specifics on the Alder and what the 9th District Commander's plans are to make up for that operational gap.
Well, I'll gladly follow up with you on that, and I appreciate a commitment to helping me understand the issue better. I guess, I mean, doesn't it make sense for the Coast Guard's icebreaking priorities and performance standards to prioritize a region's maritime cargo and their specific impacts on its population if it's not delivered due to ice? Perhaps it's already being factored in, but you know, whether it's transporting fuel in the Northeast or industrial supplies in the Great Lakes, the goal is to ensure interruptions do not occur. Is it your understanding that that is factored into the analysis right now?
Yes, sir, it absolutely is. We tier all of our waterways, and you know, we take into account the economic activity that's on those waterways, and the highest tiers have the highest priorities.
I appreciate that. I think a consistent theme that you've heard on this committee, certainly from the ranking member, is that we need more icebreakers. We need more icebreaking capability, and I appreciate the chairman's comment that we'll have $1 billion for something, but we need money for icebreakers as well. It seems like we got money for everything except for the things we actually need that are vital. So it's my hope that we will continue to work in a bipartisan passion to fund urgent priorities such as icebreakers. And I've been, quite frankly, disappointed on our lack of urgency with which we've tackled that issue. So less of a question to you and more of a statement to myself and my colleagues on the committee. With that, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gallagher. Admiral Thomas, could you elaborate on just the icebreakers right now, the status of them, briefly, an overview? Because I think there's a lot that's waiting in the pipeline, and I'm just wondering if you could briefly touch on that to elaborate on what Representative Gallagher just asked.
Well, I think Representative Gallagher is speaking mostly to our domestic icebreaking capability as opposed to the capability that would go to the poles. And there's no question that our domestic icebreaking fleet is aging infrastructure. And it is a system that needs to be recapped as a system. So we have the larger icebreaker on the Mackinac and the Great Lakes, which kind of does the highways, if you will, and then the 140s do the side roads that lead to the facilities. And on places like the Hudson River, our 65-footers are really old, but they're essential to break ice that prevents flooding and allows the delivery of fuel. So no question, icebreaking continues to be an important service that the Coast Guard offers the nation, and that domestic icebreaking fleet needs to be recapitalized.
Thank you, and I guess for the record, I would just say to my good friend and colleague, Mr. Gallagher, that there's funding in the Build Back Better Act that we'll be voting for to supply additional resources for this issue. So with that, we will move on to Representative Weber. Having no more representatives that want to ask further questions, that will conclude our hearing today. I would like to thank the witnesses for your testimony today. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses has provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing. I also ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered, the subcommittee stands adjourned.